Welcome to our channel. We present you a video that is a detailed summary and main conclusions of the book Love, Women, and Death, author Arthur Schopenhauer.
Love, Women, and Death is a book written by Arthur Schopenhauer, a German philosopher of the 19th century, in which he deeply explores the themes of love, women, and death from a philosophical and psychological perspective. In this work, Schopenhauer analyzes love and romantic relationships from a pessimistic and gloomy viewpoint. He argues that love is a fleeting illusion, and that romantic relationships often lead to dissatisfaction and suffering. According to the author, love is a trap into which we fall due to our sexual instincts and our need for companionship, but ultimately, it only leads to disappointment and pain. Regarding women, the author maintains that women are inferior beings to men, and that their nature leads them to be emotionally dependent. Schopenhauer argues that women are more prone to fall into the illusion of love and to suffer because of it. Additionally, he believes that women have a greater predisposition towards vanity and superficiality, which makes them less capable of attaining wisdom and happiness. Finally, Schopenhauer addresses the topic of death and its relationship with love and women. He argues that death is the only true release from the sufferings of life, and that only through death can true tranquility and peace be attained. The author argues that death is the only inevitable destiny for everyone, and that we must accept it as an intrinsic part of our existence. In summary, Love, Women, and Death is a book in which Arthur Schopenhauer explores the themes of love, romantic relationships, the nature of women, and the inevitability of death in a pessimistic and gloomy manner. Its main conclusions focus on the idea that love leads to suffering, that women are inferior beings, and that death is the only true release from the sufferings of life. To love is essentially to suffer, and since to live is to love, therefore, to live is essentially to suffer. But suffering makes us wise. It is the teacher of fools. Life is essentially an endless struggle, a continuous fight against others for existence. It is a natural history of pain, summed up thus: to love without reason, to suffer always, to struggle incessantly, and then to die, and so on for ages, until our planet shatters. Love, Women, and Death is a collection of essays written by the 19th century philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer, in which not only the themes referred to in the title are addressed, but also many others that occupy approximately the same number of pages in the book. The first section of the work is the longest, and it is dedicated to the phenomenon of true or passionate love, which Schopenhauer identifies as a stratagem conceived by nature to ensure the survival of our species, something like an evolution of the reproductive instinct of animals. The author is even capable of ordering men's preferences regarding women based on the needs of nature. First and foremost, their beauty is paramount, that is, their physical resemblance to the archetype of a woman, including nuances such as an age between 15 and 28 years old, good health, and a proportionate skeleton. Secondly, their psychic qualities, particularly their intelligence, since, according to him, children always inherit it from their mother. And lastly, the relative considerations, which vary from individual to individual, and pursue a balance between the characteristics of the couple. Thus, someone will find someone with qualities opposed to theirs particularly attractive, because, in this way, their offspring will be more balanced and virtuous. Women, on the other hand, maintain the same order of preference, but with some variations. They apparently prefer men aged between 30 and 35 years old, not so much because they are handsome, but rather robust, and they are more interested in their character and bravery than their intellect. Again, because it is the psychological part that their children will inherit from him. Hence it comes that women often love ugly men, but never effeminate men, because they cannot neutralize such a defect. The second section exclusively discusses women, and from the beginning, accuses them of having limited intelligence and an intellectual short-sightedness that leads them to observe closely the things nearby, and to ignore the more distant ones. For Schopenhauer, women have no status. They are like grown children, liars, and clumsy in art, and exist solely for the propagation of the species. I quote verbatim, "There should be nothing in the world but domestic women, dedicated to household chores, and unmarried young women, who should be trained, not in arrogance, but in work and submission." The third issue to be addressed is death. It may seem out of place, but it actually clearly offers the main message and the irrefutable conclusion of everything above, that the individual is ephemeral and insignificant. We die, the species does not. The oracle of nature extends to us. Our life, our death does not move her, and should not move us either, because we too are part of nature. Once we have reached this point, we are halfway through the reading. From here on, shorter and more direct essays and fragments related to very disparate themes follow, through which we can understand the sense that our philosopher gives to life, which is nothing other than suffering, considered as the natural state of existence, and all joys are taken as fortuitous and fleeting. For him, misery reigns, and is positive, because it induces change. Optimism is false and ridiculous, even corrupting, because it makes us see things distortedly, as if our natural state were happiness, when, since we spend our entire lives pursuing it, it seems obvious that it is the opposite. Desire can be eternal, satisfaction only momentary. Boredom gives us the notion of time, and distraction takes it away. This proves that our existence is so much happier the less we feel it, from which it follows that it would be better to be free from it. This is explained to us in the section entitled Dolores del Mundo, a sort of almost ontological manifesto. Another of the most elaborated sections is that of morality. In it, he says that there are only three basic springs through which all human actions are executed: selfishness, which pursues good for oneself; wickedness, which seeks pain for others; and compassion, which reduces the wall that separates people and raises them to the status of true humans. The rest of the written collages are more superficial, with the most interesting being that of religion, which Schopenhauer qualifies as a necessary evil for society, given the general inability of the masses to understand philosophy. Politics, where he concludes that the only ideal government would be the despotism of the wise, a thought very close to that of Plato and, to a lesser extent, the so-called man and society, which summarizes the ideas of the previous ones and fills them with nuances. There are two more, one dedicated to art, very disappointing, because it does nothing but talk superficially about artistic genres, and describe the sensations that music causes him as if they were objective data, and another, Peoples of the World, dedicated to celebrating a satirical parade of prejudices against the inhabitants of various European nations and also the United States. Both are so puerile that, in reality, they do not deserve any mention. They would be better off out of the book. Between the pages of Love, Women, and Death, I have been able to recognize some of my most deeply rooted convictions, manifested, however, from a somewhat subjective and, at times, to anecdotal point of view. In my opinion, Schopenhauer's enormous profusion, when quoting great literary figures, reveals his vanity. However, his view of love is truly interesting, probably very advanced for the time, and very intelligent, despite the hilarious pseudo-scientific speculations he indulges in, and which, after all, were so fashionable throughout the 19th century. His point of view regarding women is, undoubtedly, absolutely clumsy, but it must be admitted that it hides some truth. Under no circumstances will I agree to think that women are by nature less intelligent than men, but it is an irrefutable fact that they still carry a terrible, age-old legacy of prejudices and historical tendency, traditionally, to distance themselves not only from the academic sphere, but also from their own intellectual spirit, the germ of all interest. This translates, inevitably, into greater difficulty for women, than 4 men in achieving a certain degree of knowledge. However, this situation is purely transitory, and when the responsibilities between both sexes are definitively equalized, such difficulty will disappear. Clarifying this, it must be taken into account that, in Schopenhauer's time, the problem was much more pronounced, which does not justify his mistake, but makes it understandable. The main flaw I find in the writing of the 19th century philosopher lies in his tremendous ease in prematurely judging. A clear example is found in Love when, after explaining that a man can easily generate more than 100 children a year, while a woman only one, he says, fidelity in marriage is artificial for man and natural for woman, and therefore, because of its consequences and being contrary to nature, the adultery of the woman is much less forgivable than that of the man. We see that he gratuitously defends man's morality and points out that his adultery is more forgivable than that of the woman, instead of simply more common or more likely to occur. Such things detract from the seriousness and precision of any philosopher's discourse, whose duty is to always remain objective and impartial in his reasoning. There are also numerous inconsistencies in some of his arguments. For example, if intelligence is inherited from the mother, and the woman has an intellect lesser than that of the man, how can a male child be more intelligent than his mother? And if a man's character is always defined by that of his father, how can the origin, throughout natural history, of such a defect as femininity in a man be explained? Furthermore, if each part of the psyche is transmitted to the child without mixing with each other, how is genetic diversity explained? We would all be psychologically the same. The aforementioned inconsistencies can be excused by referring to the primitiveness of the scientific knowledge available at the time. Not so with that found in morality. In the first part of the book, we have learned that the individual is an accessory, that our will actually responds to the will of the species. In that case, is there any difference between selfishness and compassion? Ensuring the good of others is ensuring the safety of the species, that is, a benefit to ourselves, an act ultimately selfish. Furthermore, if we go a little further, we will see that wickedness as such does not exist. What sense does it make for someone to wish any harm to another human being and, therefore, to their own species? What the subconscious of a perverse mind really desires is not to hurt its victim, but simply to demonstrate its inferiority. Anything goes in the race for genetic transmission, both building oneself and destroying others. Unfortunately, both paths lead to success. The final conclusion is that, in this world, there is absolutely nothing but selfishness. And having said that, I have nothing more to add. From my point of view, Schopenhauer does not demonstrate, in this book, to be a great philosopher. His arguments are very interesting, yes, fresh and advanced for his time, but they ultimately arise from a mixture of Kantian philosophy and the doctrines of Brahmanism and Buddhism that, on top of that, are captured on paper with much subjectivity and little foundation. Despite everything, it is worth noting that he wrote his work, full of references to the animal nature of the human being, before Darwin popularized, in 1858, his theory of evolution by natural selection, and the enormous influence he exerted on other great intellectuals of his century and the 20th century, such as Nietzsche, Freud, Jung, Baroya, Borges, or Wagner, is undeniable. Everything seems to indicate that Schopenhauer, more than a good philosopher or writer, was a visionary. His work, a rough diamond. There is, O monks, a realm where there is no earth, nor water, nor fire, nor wind, nor the sphere of infinite space, nor the sphere of infinite consciousness, nor the sphere of nothingness, nor the sphere of neither perception or non-perception, nor this world nor the next world, nor sun nor moon. To this, O monks, I do not call either coming or going, nor duration nor death nor rebirth, since it lacks foundation, progress, and support. It is the end of suffering.